swear the tape is now rolling.
Would you raise your right hand, please, doctor? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Dr. Roy, would you please state your name for the record?
Ronald Roy.
And Dr. Roy, I am Michael Cochran, the attorney for Leola Cochran, in the case of Leola Cochran versus Paul Pollard and Owen Pollard. And I am here taking your deposition today. Have you ever had your deposition taken before?
Not in this fashion, no.
Okay, well, you are here under oath, making a verbatim and a videotape testimony of your knowledge, first-hand knowledge of the facts in this pending case. Is there any reason that you feel that you are unable to go forward here today, that you would be unable to testify?
No.
Thank you. Could you please, how are you employed, sir?
I'm the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner for the state of Maine.
And as the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner, what are your duties?
Primarily to investigate instances of death that fall under the medical examiner law, and in so doing to try and determine the cause of death, the manner of death, and occasionally the identity of the deceased.
And is it your understanding that those last items you've mentioned are duties that you perform pursuant to Maine's law?
That's right.
Now, I call your attention to on or about February 24th, 1981. Did you, at that time, go to a scene in Dedham, Maine, to perform official duties as a medical examiner?
Yes, I did.
Now, before I get to that, could you please tell me, are you an MD?
Yes.
And what sort of training have you had to qualify you as a Deputy Chief Medical Examiner?
Well, my training has been in anatomic and general pathology, both in the United States and in Canada. I've taken training in psychiatry and forensic pathology at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, and have functioned as the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner as a forensic pathologist for the last 11 years here in Maine.
Okay, now, to break that down, as pathology, what is pathology?
Well, pathology is a subspecialty of medicine that basically deals with disease processes, and as such, a pathologist is basically a consultant to other physicians. Generally, the public thinks of a pathologist as someone who runs a hospital laboratory, who examines pap smears and biopsies and so forth. And then forensic pathology is a further subspecialty of that, where we really limit ourselves to matters of death and matters which are medical legal in that relation.
Okay. Now, as a forensic pathologist and as Deputy Chief Medical Examiner of Maine, what is the focus of your scientific inquiry when you are called into a case?
Primarily to discover what I can that will help me arrive at the cause of death and the manner of death.
Okay. Now, you are always doing that with an eye to perhaps testifying in court?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay. Well, how often do you testify in court?
That is a difficult figure to arrive at. I can tell you that I've performed approximately 175 homicide autopsies since I've been here, and a high percentage of those involve testimony of various sorts, grand jury and probable cause bail hearings and the actual trials. So I would be guessing 150 anyway.
And you have qualified as an expert witness in the courts of Maine?
Yes, I have.
In the Superior Court?
Yes.
And, all right. Now, in Michael Cochran's case, in the case of the homicide on that you investigated on February 24th, 1981.
Objection to the form of the question.
Okay. On February 24th, 1981, you went to Lucerne in Maine to perform a investigation of a death?
To examine the scene, yes.
Okay, and what was the first thing that you recall about what took place at that time?
Well, I remember arriving at a fairly badly burned small building the size of a cottage. It was basically burnt almost to the ground. It was difficult to identify a body at the scene till it was pointed out to us, and then we were able to recognize a badly charred body lying on its stomach near the front of the building.
Okay, who called you to the scene?
The office was called. I'm not sure who called the case in, but we proceeded on the basis of that phone call.
Okay, and you went to Lucerne, and someone pointed out what appeared to be a body to you?
That's right.
And could you describe the position of the body?
Well, I'd have to refer to my medical examiner's report. The body appeared to be lying on its stomach, and it was still within the confines of the building in what would probably is a porch area.
Now, what did you do at the scene?
Really did very little beyond just that preliminary examination. There really was not much we could do. The remainder of that sort of scene belongs to the fire marshal. The body was removed to the morgue.
Now, could you tell me whether you observed any charring on the body at the scene?
Oh, yes.
Would you describe that charring as to what degree the body was charred?
That's fairly severe.
Now, you say you removed the body to the medical examiner's office.
That's
You were
right.
actually present when that was done?
Yes.
What did you do at the medical examiner's office to investigate this death?
Well, the body was taken to the morgue at Kennebec Valley Medical Center, and the next morning I further examined it externally to determine the extent of injury that had occurred. The internal organs were examined. The trachea was examined for evidence of soot. Blood was collected for toxicology testing. The jaws were removed for further dental identification. Dr. Ryan and myself had briefly charted the fillings to see if they were compatible with the information we had, and we felt they were, so we were going to proceed with more definitive identification beyond this. We felt that it probably was Michael Cochran. We wanted a dentist to confirm this.
Okay. Now, you said that you felt it was probably Michael Cochran at the time of the autopsy. Could you tell me what you based that on at that time?
Mainly the comparison of the dental work with the chart.
You were provided with a chart of Michael Cochran's dental history at that time?
I don't know if we had it at that time. What we did was chart it. I cannot specifically recall the details. It's quite a long time ago. But the fillings were charted, and most likely were compared over the phone with the dentist's charts. He might have, I suspect what happened, he read them to us and we compared them and said, this is probably who it is.
Okay. When you say that you suspect that was what happened, was it your routine to proceed that way?
At the time it was. Now we try and obtain all these records when a person is reported missing, so we have them on hand right at the time of examination.
I'd like to show you what's been marked as Roy Deposition Exhibit Number 1, and ask if you could identify that, please.
That's a copy of my autopsy report on Michael Cochran.
Okay. And was that the autopsy you've been describing that was performed on February 25th, 1981?
That's right.
Right. Now, you say that, could you please tell me what you concluded from your examination at that time?
I concluded that the cause of death was due to inhalation of products of combustion, including carbon monoxide, which is standard terminology we use to indicate death in a fire.
Okay. What was that based upon as of February 25th?
That's based on presence of soot in the trachea.
Now, let me stop you there. Did you, in fact, observe soot in the trachea?
I believe I did. Yes, I did.
Okay. And can you describe, perhaps in layman's terms, why that's a sign of
Well,
what that means?
That indicates that a person was breathing in smoke, such that it did get into the airways. You may find some passive accumulation of smoke in the mouth and in the nose, but it doesn't go very deep when the person is deceased. If they're alive, they'll breathe it deeper.
Okay, and you found that on Michael Cochran's body?
Yes.
Now, what else did you base that conclusion of the cause of death on at that time?
Well, at his age, would first of all almost rule out, just as a beginner, almost rule out natural disease. You confirm this upon examination of the internal organs. There was no evidence of heart disease, pneumonia, or any of the things that might possibly cause death. There was no evidence of gunshot wounds, stab wounds to the chest, to the trunk or head.
Now, do I understand you that what you're saying is that there was no other obvious cause of death?
That's right.
And did you do sections of the brain, for instance, to look for trauma?
Yes, I did.
And did you find anything?
No, other than injuries which are consistent with post-mortem fire artifact.
Okay. And did you do sections of the lungs and chest?
Yes, I did.
And did you find any evidence of trauma?
No,
Okay, that means no stab wounds, no gunshot wounds.
that's right.
Now, the back of the head or cranium was missing or badly fractured, was it not?
That's right.
Is that something that you find commonly in severe fires?
Yes, that is an not unexpected finding.
Okay. Was there anything about the condition of this particular body that was inconsistent with the cause of death that you've described of death in the fire by carbon monoxide inhalation?
No.
Okay. Do you have any doubt in your mind that the cause of death was as what you have described?
No.
Now, did you in fact send out samples of the blood for testing for carbon monoxide?
Yes, I did.
Now, you said, was carbon monoxide something that you could observe at the time of the autopsy in any way?
You can often get a suggestion from the coloration of the blood. One thing that can be done is what's called a carbon monoxide screening test, where you dilute some blood and subject it to 10% sodium hydroxide and watch for decoloration. People who have significant amounts of carbon monoxide, their blood resists that, and it's a preliminary suggestive test that it is present. It works very well for us.
Okay. Now, did you find evidence of carbon monoxide in Mr. Cochran's blood then on February 25th?
I don't recall if I did that test.
Okay. What did you do to determine whether carbon monoxide was present?
Well,
at this point, let me show you
yes.
also Roy Deposition Exhibit number 2 and ask you to
Mhm.
identify that.
That is the toxicology report. In fact, let me see, for blood for cell. There is no way to be sure that there's carbon monoxide other than doing that test, and again, that's a screening test. It's not proof positive.
Okay.
You have to rely on the toxicology results.
Okay, so do I understand you that Deposition Exhibit number 2 is a toxicology report on the blood of Michael Cochran?
Yes, it is.
That you received after sending a sample out?
Yes,
Okay, you took a sample at the time of the autopsy
That's
and
right.
sent it to the State Public Health Lab?
that's right.
And then they sent you back the report that is, a copy of which is Roy number 2?
Yes.
And could you please state what the results were?
Well, it indicates a carbon monoxide saturation of 46%, that there's a small amount of alcohol present in the blood, and also detected in the urine were cocaine and nicotine.
Okay, now, 46% carbon monoxide, is that a fatal level?
Yes, it is.
Okay, could you please state what is the range of fatal levels that one finds in carbon monoxide?
Well, it depends on who you care to listen to. I think 30% is a very serious level, and some people will consider that approaching lethal. Almost everyone will accept 50% as being a lethal level.
Okay, and the result with Mr. Cochran was 46%.
That's right.
Now, what else, if anything, did you do on February 25th, backtracking again to the actual autopsy?
Well, I think I don't recall if there's anything
Okay.
else.
Let me just summarize then. You examined the body externally?
Yes.
Okay, and then you examined the body's organs to look for any other process which could account for Mr. Cochran's death?
That's right.
And you found no pathological process in Mr. Cochran's organs, no disease or any other thing that would account for his death?
No.
Okay.
Yes,
And you did find a lethal level of carbon monoxide.
that's right.
Does this indicate that Mr. Cochran was alive during the fire?
I believe it does, yes.
How does soot in the lungs and carbon monoxide in the blood indicate that?
By active breathing, by breathing these substances in.
Okay. Now, are you confident that there was no other traumatic injury to Mr. Cochran?
I cannot rule out that he was not struck on the head, or even that he had a skull fracture. I cannot rule out any injuries to his arms or legs for those portions of his extremities that are missing. Obviously, I can't tell you what happened there. I don't see any evidence of any penetrating wounds to the head or the trunk.
Okay. Are you confident that, well, you have examined other fire victims?
Yes, many.
Okay. Did Mr. Cochran's body look markedly different from what you have observed in other fire victims who died with the same cause of death you've described?
Well, not necessarily. There's a whole spectrum from bodies as severe as this to some that are barely charred at all.
Okay. And this was severe charring.
Yes.
Have you found missing extremities in other cases?
Oh, yes,
Okay, that also is not uncommon in fire victims?
that's right.
Okay. Now, based upon that cause of death, of carbon monoxide inhalation, did you reach a conclusion as to manner of death?
No, I could not from my autopsy examination and the information I had.
What is that sort of distinction that pathologists make between cause of death and manner of death?
Well, the cause of death obviously is which process caused the person's life to stop. The manner of death is basically 5, in some jurisdictions 6 categories, which amount to homicide, suicide, accident, natural death, undetermined, and some jurisdictions use unclassified.
Okay. Did you eventually reach a conclusion in this case as to manner of death?
Yes, I did.
And what was that conclusion?
Homicide.
And why did you reach that?
That's based on the information from the fire marshal's office that they believe that this was an arson. So on that basis, this would be a homicide.
In other words, you concluded that Mr. Cochran died as a result of the fire, and if the fire was an intentionally set fire, then death was a homicide.
That's right.
Now, let me show you what has been marked as Roy Deposition Exhibit number 3, and ask if you can identify that for me.
Well, it's an abstract from the Department of Vital Records of a death certificate.
Okay, did you make out the death certificate?
Yes, I did.
Let me show you what's been marked as Roy Deposition. Well, backtracking for a moment. Roy 3, does it bear a copy of your signature?
It has my name on it. It's not my signature.
Okay, let me show you Roy Deposition Exhibit number 6 and ask whether you can identify that.
Yes, that is the death certificate that I filled out on February 25th.
Okay. Now, that is to say, I'm just examining it here. On February 25th, you listed the immediate cause as inhalation of products of combustion, including carbon monoxide, the cause of death.
Yes.
And let me show you what's been marked as Roy Deposition Exhibit number 7, and ask you to identify that.
This is a copy of what we call a supplemental cause of death, which we issue when there's further alteration to be done or amendments to be made to the original death certificate. And this one indicates that I've changed item 28A, the manner, to homicide.
Okay. Was there any manner that was previously listed?
Yes, pending investigation on the original certificate.
And then by June 1st, 1981, you have changed that to homicide.
That's right.
Now, what, if anything, did you do to continue to pin down the identification of the victim as Michael Cochran?
Let me look at this for one moment, please. I might like to just clarify something now that you previously asked me, now that I can see in my report, which I missed. At the autopsy, we did have dental charts labeled Michael Craig Cochran, and these were compared to the charts that we made post-mortem, so we did have something to compare right then and there. The jars were removed, and all of this material was sent to a Dr. Seidel, who's a dentist, for further comparison and verification.
Now, you made a preliminary identification based on those dental charts on February 25th, 1981, at the time of the autopsy.
That's right.
And at that time, you actually removed the jaw of the decedent,
Yes,
and you sent it to Dr. Seidel.
that's right.
And at that point, what was the process that you expected to take place?
Well, I expected Dr. Seidel to compare the dental charting with the actual specimens, preferably to take post-mortem x-rays and compare them with any pre-mortem x-rays that might be available, and on the basis of all these to tell us whether he felt this was Michael Cochran.
Okay, I'd like to show you what's been marked as Roy Deposition Exhibit number 4, and ask if you would identify that.
This is a report from Dr. Seidel.
Take a break.
Tape rolling again.
Okay, Doctor, back on the record, I would like to just conclude this portion of the examination with a few more general questions. One, you said that the body was severely charred. I'd like to represent to you that the fire marshal had an opinion that that gasoline was probably poured directly on the body from the degree of charring. Would that be something that you would defer to him on?
Well, I don't know that I could prove that. Certainly in review of several fire cases, I have seen bodies as badly charred as this were. I don't think that was the mechanism.
Okay. Did you know in those cases whether the mechanism was the body falling into and being packed in embers?
Well, two that I'm aware of where there was damage as severe as this was, one in an automobile, and the other was in a trailer, small spaces.
Okay. The automobile certainly would have involved a gasoline fire in close proximity to the body.
Possibly.
Would in reaching that kind of opinion, the heat of the fire and the amount of time that the body was subjected to the heat would be important variables?
That, I think, is the most important factor in causing a body to be severely charred, is just the length of time in which they're exposed to high heat.
Okay. And someone who was familiar with the actual fire would need to review the history of the event to, in other words, the history of the fire, how long the fire was burning, how quickly it was put out, factors such as that in order to decide whether it was probable that there was some accelerant poured directly on the body.
Objection. Go ahead, Doctor, if you can answer the question.
Well, I don't really know. I'm not a fire marshal. I
Okay.
really,
My question was, would you defer to a fire marshal's opinion on a subject like that?
well, he's entitled to make that opinion. I'm not sure I would agree with it from examination of the body. I would take another approach to prove that.
Okay, well, what would be your approach?
Well, I think the body tissues and possibly the blood should be examined for gasoline itself.
Okay, and was that done in this case?
No.
Okay, so would you know anything at this point to contradict the fire marshal's opinion in this particular
Objection.
case?
Pure speculation. Go ahead, Doctor.
I don't know if there would be anything that would contradict it.
Okay, you simply don't have enough information at your disposal to say one way or another?
The only answer I have for you in regard to this question is that I have seen bodies in other fires that are as severely charred as this. It's not uncommon.
Okay. Now, let me also ask you whether, and just a moment, you said there were two fires that you recall? One
Two
was-
that I can recall that I was able to look at photographs of recently and say, yes, these are as badly charred as others.
Okay, and one of those was an automobile fire?
That's
and
right.
The other a trailer fire?
Yes.
Now, and how many bodies, burn victims have you seen in your career?
Oh, I wouldn't know those numbers. I'd have to go back and try and count them all through over the years. I don't have that.
Well, it would be more than 10 or 20 or more.
Oh. We might be talking between around 40, I would guess.
Okay. Now, on page 3 of your medical examiner's report, your autopsy report, talking about Roy exhibit number 1, I notice that there is a reference in the lungs to show 3 artifactual cuts on their right upper lobe and anteriorly.
Yes.
What is that evidence of some kind of trauma that occurred at the time of Mr. Cochran's death?
No, this is evidence of trauma that was created by me at the time of the autopsy.
And by artifactual, that means an artifact caused by the autopsy itself?
That's right.
That's the cut in which you open up the chest
That's
to
right.
examine it? All right. Now, at this point, I want to get into the dental identification and what your office did, and what information you received a little bit more. One thing I'd like to ask you generally, though, is that all these exhibits that we have been looking at, are they copies that have been made from your medical examiner's file that you have with you today?
Yes, they are.
And that's the file of the State of Maine's Medical Examiner's Office, which we subpoenaed and you brought here?
Yes, it is.
And have you been able to see, as you identify these exhibits, that they are actually copies of what's in your file?
Yes.
And Marvin, do I have your agreement that we can use these copies in lieu of the originals?
For this deposition, absolutely.
Okay, well, I would,
And to the extent that they're admissible at trial, also at trial.
okay, thank you. Now, I was asking, did you have an objection in regards to the dental stuff that you wanted to state?
Let me just make a general objection that all the information from this point on may be information beyond this doctor's capability to answer, especially where he sent it off to a dentist, I guess, to look at dental checks. And in the event that becomes a problem, I would object to any further evidence given by Dr. Roy. However, if we agree or stipulate it was Michael Cochran who died in the fire, which is most likely, then I will waive my objection. We can go into trial without getting this on to the record.
Okay. Now, proceeding, I think we were talking about deposition exhibit number 4, Roy exhibit number 4, which purports to be a letter from Henry Ryan from John C. Seidel, a dentist in Portland, dated April 27th, 1981. Again, could you tell me what the purpose of that letter was, and and how it came to be written to you, as you understand it, or to Dr. Ryan, your office?
Well, this letter indicates the specimens that were received from our office for examination, the results of his examination, and his conclusion. The specimens were mandible and maxilla from Mr. Cochran, from the deceased, the dental chart, dental x-rays, and other x-rays. He indicates that he made comparison of these various specimens, and then concludes, in his opinion, the dental record marked Michael Cochran is that of the specimen ML81178, which is our number for the Michael Cochran autopsy.
And does he conclude that the missing teeth and restorations are exactly the same?
Yes, he does.
And would, as a forensic pathologist, did you find that to be persuasive in terms of identifying the victim?
Yes.
Now, are dental identifications a highly reliable means of identifying an unknown body?
They can be if you have enough material to work with, yes.
And from your experience, would you trust this particular identification as having been based upon enough material?
Yes.
Now, was there some, let me show you what has been marked as another exhibit in this particular case. If I can find it here. Why don't we go off the record again for a second? Let me show you what's been marked as Roy Deposition Exhibit number 5. And ask if you can identify that from your file.
This is the dental identification record which we supply to the dentist. It's a standard form, and it's been filled out by Dr. Seidel, where he has charted the dental work done on the jaws removed from the body. So this is post-mortem dental charting.
Okay, so number 5 is something that you send in blank to Dr. Seidel, and then he makes it out and returns it to you?
That's right.
Okay, and he sent this back to you, it's in your file?
Yes.
I noticed that on many of these documents from your office, the file number or label of MC-81-178 appears. What is the significance of that number?
It's ML. It means medical legal case number 178 in the year 1981. And that's, there's one case number for every case accession.
Okay, and which is that ML81178, is that the Michael Cochran medical examiner's file number?
Yes, it is.
And so anywhere that I see it on these documents that we've marked as exhibits, that would be its meaning, it would be referencing the file of your office?
That's right.
Now, let me show you what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 8, Roy number 8. And I'll just say that it seems to be, there's at least 4 pages, and ask if you would please identify whether it comes from your file, and Rob, just quickly skim through it and tell me what it is.
Yes, these are a series of correspondence. There's 3 letters from Dr. Ryan and 1 from Dr. Seidel.
And this is all in regard to the dental identification of Mr. Cochran?
That's right.
Okay. Okay, let's go off the record for a moment.
Tape is rolling.
Hey, Doctor, let me show you a couple of more exhibits. First of all, Roy deposition exhibit number 9, and ask if that is something from your file.
Yes, it is.
And could you tell me what that is?
It's a letter from the acting superintendent of the Maine Youth Center indicating that he's sending us a photocopy of the dental records and 2 x-ray films.
Of Michael Cochran.
That's right.
And Roy deposition exhibit number 10.
And this is portion of a dental record.
Okay, do you know from your file where number 10 relates to any of the other
I
documents?
have to look. That one does not look familiar to me. Yes, this is the back side of the dental record. It's a description of what procedures were performed.
Okay, could I please see that? I don't think we've got it completely copied. In other words, it's a 2-sided,
That's right.
and the other side, which we will now make a copy of and affix it to, is a dental chart, and this is an does it appear to be an original chart of Michael Cochran's as
Well, this would be the photocopy that this letter is referring to.
Okay.
This is not the kind of office photocopies we
Okay.
make.
So 10, and the backside, which we will label 11, were the attachments for Roy deposition exhibit number 9?
Yes.
Okay. And I'll just hold this here and we'll mark it in a moment. The Roy deposition exhibit number 1, which I believe is your autopsy report, was that dictated or written at the time of the autopsy itself or near it?
It's dictated on a small handheld recorder.
As you at the autopsy site?
That's right.
And is it your routine practice to make out a report like this, a written report?
Yes.
Is this something that you feel is part of your official duties?
Yes.
How do you always make out an official autopsy report?
Yes.
And you make the notations in it of what you note. Is that something, in terms of the state of the organs, what you find, is that something that you describe actually at that time from your first-hand knowledge?
It's a running description of what I am observing. Hopefully I've made all the pertinent observations. Sometimes I miss things, but that's what it represents.
Okay. Now, deposition exhibit number 2, the report of the public health laboratory. Is this a sort of toxicology test thing, something that you routinely rely upon in the medical profession?
Yes.
Now, did you try any other means? Did you have some medical records of Michael Cochran that were given to you?
I have some medical records. I don't recall if I did anything with them or not.
Okay. Did you, at any point, make a determination whether what you observed at autopsy was consistent or inconsistent with the medical records that you had obtained?
No, I did not.
Okay. Now, do you know my client, Mrs. Cochran, or have you ever had any dealings with her?
No, I have not.
Okay. At any time, she's never spoken to you?
Oh, she may have spoken to me once on the phone. I think that's about it.
Okay. What do you recall of that phone call?
Nothing.
Okay.
I seem to remember her voice, and that's about all I can recall.
Okay. Now, the sort of evidence that you've been giving here, this is the type of testimony that you have given many times in the courts of Maine?
Yes.
And this is, in your own understanding of it, well within your expertise as a forensic pathologist and as a medical examiner?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Just a few questions, Doctor. Did you notice if this individual that was found by you in the fire, that is, when I say found, you didn't find the body, but observed the body, was that by a doorway, if you remember?
Well, I can't really say that I would recognize any doorways at that scene.
All right. Doctor, the condition of the skull as you describe it, am I correct in understanding that is consistent with the view that you've seen of skulls in many other fire situations?
Yes, that's not uncommon.
And in terms of the level of monoxide, is that uncommon in fire scenes or victims of fire that you've had a chance to examine?
Well, let me put it this way. In many of the fire deaths that we have examined, the levels have actually been higher. So it's not uncommon to find a level at least of this amount.
Have you ever examined a person involved in the fire where gasoline has been actually poured on the person? Have you ever done that?
I have experience with a case of self-immolation where a person poured gasoline on themselves out of doors and lit themselves on fire.
What was the carbon monoxide in that case?
I can't specifically recall a level, but I do recall it was not high.
Doctor, but for the information that was given to you by the fire marshal's office, would you have put the word homicide on the amended death certificate?
No.
Okay. And again, there's no question that death in this case was caused by carbon monoxide poisoning.
I have no problems with that.
Nothing further. Thank you, Doctor.
Just go off the record for a moment. Just a few more questions, Doctor. The body that you examined, was that of a white male?
Yes.
Okay, and was could you tell whether or not the penis appeared to be circumcised?
Yes, it did.
And was the body much more badly burned on the back, the top, in other words? Let me back up for a second. The body was lying on its face?
Yes.
And was the body in something of a pugilistic attitude, in other words, with the arms bunched up?
Objection to that question.
Well, that's a term of art, is it not, among pathologists?
That is practically how all bodies in fires wind up, is heat contraction of the arms and legs, and they just pull right up. It's a postmortem effect.
Okay, so, and then you found the body with the arms and legs pulled up in that way?
Yes.
And the body, then going back to what I was saying, since the body was lying on its face down, did you find that the back was much more severely charred than the belly?
Yes.
And the charring on the back at places went right through to expose the pleural cavities?
Yes.
And was there a bit of unburned floor underneath the body?
I don't recall. Unless I describe that, I can't tell you. I don't know.
Okay, did you recover a bit of material that you believe to be a faded blue jean or denim from the fire scene?
Yes.
Okay, and do you remember where particularly that came from?
Well, these were picked up and taken with the body.
Okay. I note that Exhibit 1, your report, has a notation in terms of some current jelly-type percolated epidural bright red clot, extruding from where the fractured skull was. Is this in any way sort of abnormal in a victim who's got that cranial fracture that you've described that fire victims have?
No, that's a classical postmortem fire artifact.
Okay, and you also mentioned somewhere in here that there was some calcine on the ends of the missing extremities. What does that mean?
Well, that's a change in the bone where basically the protein content is cooked out as a result of exposure to high heat.
Do you always find that in fires?
No.
Okay, does that indicate extremely high heat?
Well, it indicates that the body was in proximity to significant heat, as opposed to bodies which might be found in another portion of the house that are slightly charred and have a lot of soot. You may have some heat fractures or some heat contraction, but they generally don't get calcium. They're not that close to the heat source.
The degree of the fracturing to the skull that you noticed in this body, was it, can you compare it with other fractures that you've seen in fire victims?
Yes, it's not dissimilar from other severe fire victims.
And was this a very, in terms of those severe fire victims, is this, in other words, classifying them as opposed to other, fires you've seen, was it in fact a severe fracture?
Well, it's not, I don't know if you can say a matter of severity. You could have a flame near the head and have fractures of the skull and have completely intact lower extremities because the flame would not be there. So it's not a matter of severity. I don't know if that really gets to the point.
What is the mechanism that causes that?
Well, there's boiling of blood in between the two tables. There's expansion from the effects of the heat, and it just will burst.
Okay. Now, do you have any way of determining whether there was consciousness during this fire?
No.
Do you have... Okay. Do you have any... Would you... Strike that. I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Just 1 second, please. Okay, Doctor, did you use the word explode when you talked about the brain and the skull?
In a sense, that's what's happening on a small level. I mean, it's not like a big explosion.
No,
but, the sutures separate, the skull will fracture, and things will just expand and open up.
apart, coming out.
That's right.
And Doctor, again, as I understand it, this type of problem with the skull expanding out, you've seen that in many other fires.
Yes.
Okay. And those fires, there was no question, I take it, about whether gasoline was poured on the body or anything like that.
Not that I'm aware of.
I have nothing further. Thank you, Doctor.
Just to go back to that last point on the business of determining whether or not gasoline was poured on the body, would it be important, first of all, is that a call that you have ever made within your professional experience?
Yes, I had a homicide, fire, death, arson, where there was gasoline involved, and gasoline was detected in the tissues and the blood.
Okay, and in that case, you tested the blood and the tissues directly for the gasoline?
That's right.
Okay. Now, can you, besides that, can you ever remember, will you strike that, would you want to know, without that sort of test, would you want to know how long the body had been exposed to the heat? If you were, what I'm asking is, if you were trying to make a call directly from the body itself.
I don't know if that information would mean much to me, first of all. And secondly, if the heat's high enough, it could be of brief duration, but be high enough to produce the same effect.
Okay. Now, in terms of stacking your opinion up against that of a fire marshal who had investigated fires uniquely for 42 years, and that was their only expertise, would you respect the opinion of a fire marshal who made a professional call on that issue?
Objection. Respectfully.
I think it'd be a rather neutral thing. I mean, he's entitled to his opinion, but I would also point out to him that I've seen other cases of bodies that's almost as badly burnt or as badly burnt as this, that there was not that suspicion.
Okay. Thank you.
I have nothing further.